It's actually pretty amazing to think taking the same route as Joseph would have been 100 years ago, exactly, more or less. He would have been leaving the Belgium-France border, headed to the Somme, which is where I'm now on the way to prepare for battle. He must have been absolutely terrified.
Cheryl's meeting battlefield guide, Paul Reed, outside the village of Guillemont.
My great-grandfather was on the Belgium-France border, so I don't know what he did when he left there and came here for battle, and I was hoping you could help me with the rest.
Sure. Well, he would have marched down to the Somme.
So when you say marched, though, you don't mean like marched, or you do?
Yeah. When they marched down from Belgium, where you've come from, they literally marched. They marched for an hour at a time.
It must have been for days, no?
Yeah, days. It would have taken days to get down here. And when he got here, the Battle of the Somme was 2 months old. So they've been fighting in that direction, the beginning of the battle in July, and over 2 months, gradually, they'd pushed the Germans back to a point where the artillery had smashed this landscape to pieces. It was just a lunar landscape. I mean, when you look at photographs like these that show you the utter devastation of this area, this is the village of Guillemont that we're standing close to now, and as you can see, there's just nothing left.
Wow.
Everything's destroyed.
By occupying Guillemont, the Germans were able to prevent the British and French front lines from advancing together. The British had already launched 3 failed attempts to take the village, at a cost of thousands of lives. Now, Joseph's battalion were ordered to prepare the ground for one final push.
His battalion came from the edge of the wood over there towards here, and they were coming forward to dig advanced trenches here, so there was a shorter distance for the lads to move out across open ground.
Right.
So that meant for him, he was then exposed himself, standing there,
Of course, yeah.
digging a trench in the open to enable others to get cover. So that's...
Massive responsibility, huge job.
It is. So on the 3rd of September 1916, his battalion was involved in an attack across this ground from the edge of the wood across what is now these wheat fields. They look very innocent today, but of course in 1916 these were killing grounds with the Germans dug in here with machine guns.
As his battalion advanced, Joseph had to march over ground littered with the dead from previous battles. And the resistance he faced when they reached the German defences was ferocious. After a bitter struggle, the British captured Guillemont at a cost of almost 2,000 casualties. But there was no rest for Joseph and the pioneers.
His job was to assist in then defending this village, because once you captured it, the Germans would attack and try and take it back again.
Right.
So you needed to put up defences, barbed wire to stop them getting back in, build machine gun positions, shelters for the infantry and the officers and so on. So he's out there doing all that. The pioneers stayed there for days and days doing the work. Theirs is a task, really, that never ends.
Yeah, and they're exposed.
Very exposed.
He's a brave man.
Brave man, yeah. So in the fighting, they lost some of their leaders. So like your great-grandfather was suddenly promoted. He was given promotion to Lance Corporal. That's one stripe on his uniform.
He would have had to have proven himself and worked hard to do so.
Yeah.
And I find it really actually quite lovely under the circumstances. I'm really proud of him. It's actually surreal to think that we're stood here like 100 years later with the luxuries we now have because of their sacrifice.
Exactly, exactly. I mean, the Great War is one of those things that it's about ordinary people like your great-grandfather in extraordinary circumstances.
Yeah.
When we look at a battlefield like this 100 years later, I mean, it looks, to all intents and purposes, as if it's recovered. But the reality is it's never really recovered. Human remains are still uncovered every single year.
Oh, my God.
So, I mean, look in any direction now, you're looking to a place where there are still soldiers out there. And it's one great big cemetery, really.
Back in them days, nobody knew about post-traumatic stress or really understood or even cared really about the aftercare for soldiers that survived. So I'm really not surprised that he was drinking excessively. He probably needed some form of escape. And I'm sure that you would become quite an angry person after you'd experienced some of the horrific things they did here.
The war dragged on for another 2 years of bloody fighting, finally coming to an end in November 1918. It took months to bring the troops home, and Joseph returned to the UK the following summer, having spent nearly 4 years on the Western Front. He had seen the war through from start to finish. Joseph went back to work at the co-op and had a further 4 children with his wife, Mary Ann, before her death in 1930. 2 years later, when Joseph was 50, Cheryl's great-grandmother, Edith Annie Burton, gave birth to their twin daughters. Joseph and Edith Annie were never married. Joseph died in 1951, 8 years before Cheryl's mother, Joan, was born. Joan never knew anything about her grandfather, not even his name. Before she leaves France, Cheryl's visiting the nearby Pozières Memorial to pay her respects to some of the soldiers of the Durham Light Infantry who never came home.
It really makes sense now. It all comes together as to why nobody really spoke about Joseph, and he was kind of a mystery in the family. He may have had a bit of a reputation afterwards of being a little bit disturbed, and he probably didn't want to talk about his war stories. I think there was a lot of men that didn't really talk about their experiences, and therefore nobody else did either. And I would guess part of it was because my great-grandma was his housekeeper, and in those days, having children out of wedlock was seriously frowned upon. So he was always a mystery, and now I can put a man to that mystery. Before I set off on this journey, I always had a great sense of the Northeast, and I always had a great instinct that I was rootedly from there. This whole experience has really told me that it's true when they say Northerners are made of tough stuff. There's just a great sense of resilience and strength there, and the fact that I'm from the Northeast all that time ago on both sides just is proof to me that what I thought and what I felt was the truth.